June, 1816. The northern hemisphere waits for warmth. A farmer looks up at the sky, but instead of sunlight, he sees a heavy gray veil. Not drops of rain, but thick white flakes fall. Snow, in June. It blankets the green shoots, turning fields of hope into white shrouds. Spring never arrived. The end of May passed beneath a frozen sky. Now winter's icy breath has crept into the heart of summer. Rivers, the main arteries of trade, still lie locked in ice. The world stands still. This year went down in history as the year without a summer. And it wasn't just a climate anomaly. It marked the starting point for a chain of events that reshaped our civilization. Step by step, we'll unravel this sequence of disasters. You'll see how cold and hunger in Europe sparked the first recorded cholera pandemic in Asia. We'll explore how relentless rain trapped a group of rebellious youths in a Swiss mansion, and pushed them to create two immortal monsters, Frankenstein and the vampire. This is the story of how a darkened sun ignited a blaze of genius. The anomaly wasn't confined to one spot. It spread across the continent like gangrene. In Switzerland, the sky just broke open. Day after day, a week, a month, 130 days of relentless cold rain. Floodwaters washed away roads, tore down bridges, and turned pastures into swamps. When the downpours finally stopped, frost hit in August, killing what little had survived. This wasn't just a bad year, it felt like the planet was being slowly strangled. Panic gripped towns and villages. Preachers shouted from pulpits about the end of the world, claiming divine punishment for the sins of the Napoleonic Wars that had torn Europe apart for years. People looked up at the sky and saw proof. The sun had become a sickly, dull red spot. You could stare at it without pain, like the moon, and see dark scars, sunspots, that seemed like ominous warnings. Science stayed silent. Religion offered only one answer: repentance in the face of apocalypse. What unfolded in Europe was just a ripple on the water before the tsunami struck. Cold gripped one part of the world, but its unseen echo was setting the stage for a completely different disaster halfway across the globe. In America, farmers stared at frozen cornfields. In India, people prayed for rain that would never come. They had no idea their fates were tied together by a single invisible thread of ash. Even Thomas Jefferson, and former president, now just a farmer, recorded his weather observations with growing concern. His notes aren't dry data. They tell the story of a disaster. Freezing temperatures struck the East Coast in the middle of summer, destroying crops at their roots. Corn stalks blackened and snapped in his hands. Fields meant to feed the nation turned into lifeless wastelands. The grain and tobacco harvest, the backbone of the economy, fell to less than a third of the usual yield. This wasn't just a crisis. It was an economic collapse documented by one of the founding fathers himself. The crop failure wasn't just a number in an accountant's ledger. It sparked a chain reaction. Farmers who lost everything stared at empty barns and homes taken as collateral. Their choice was stark: stay and starve, or leave it all behind and head west into the unknown. Tens of thousands of families packed their belongings and set out on the road. This mass migration, born from desperation, flowed like a human river away from the cursed coast. It reshaped the country's population forever, giving rise to new states, Illinois and Indiana. The map of America was being redrawn under the weight of the cold. While one half of the world froze, the other was drying up. In India, people awaited the monsoons. For centuries, this reliable rainy season had meant life itself. But in 1816, it never arrived. The crucial temperature difference between land and ocean, the massive engine driving those moist winds, vanished. First, drought turned the soil to stone. Then, belated and fierce downpours slammed into that hard, lifeless crust. Instead of soaking in, the rains washed away the entire fertile topsoil into the rivers. The resulting famine that struck India was unlike anything before. Right here, in a cauldron of drought and despair, a monster far deadlier than any fictional beast was born. Until the 19th century, cholera was a tragedy, but a local one, endemic to India, rarely venturing beyond its borders. Then the monsoons failed and the river's chemistry shifted. This created the perfect breeding ground for the cholera vibrio. This microscopic predator, dormant for centuries, gained unprecedented power. In 1816, cholera broke free for the first time in history, erupting into a pandemic. It left India aboard trading ships and marched across the globe with British soldiers. Famine redrew the map of America. Drought sparked starvation in India. A disease long imprisoned broke loose to kill millions. These events linked together: hunger, migration, pandemic. But how did one incident a year earlier on a forgotten island in Indonesia bring the whole world to its knees? The answer to all these mysteries lies in one place, on a single island, and on one day that changed everything. April 5th, 1815, Sumba Island, Indonesia. Tambora volcano, silent for centuries, erupted. The first blast thundered through the air, ash and rocks raining down across the landscape. For days the island held its breath. The earth's trembling faded, the roar died away. Survivors of the initial blast let out a relieved sigh. They thought the worst was over. They were wrong. It was only the beginning. On April 10th, the ground cracked open. The main explosion wasn't a sound. It was a silence that swallowed everything. The summit, towering at 4,200 meters, simply vanished, evaporated, shrinking the volcano's height by nearly a third. A scorching pyroclastic flow, a deadly mix of gas, ash, and rock, rushed down the slopes, wiping out every living thing in its path. This is how the Asian Pompeii was born, a civilization buried alive. This was the most powerful and destructive volcanic eruption recorded in human history. The ash and smoke shot up 43 kilometers high. Not just the atmosphere where planes fly, almost into space. A height where satellites orbit. The volcano blasted its plume into the stratosphere, that thin, stable layer above the weather, above the clouds, above our lives. And this blast carried more than just ash. It carried poison for the climate. Along with rocks and dust, 60 million tons of sulfur dioxide soared into the sky. 60 million tons. This chemical compound became the trigger for a global catastrophe. Once in the stratosphere, it didn't fall back down. Instead, it reacted with water vapor, turning into microscopic droplets of sulfuric acid. Billions of these droplets formed a delicate, almost invisible veil. In effect, the planet put on giant sunglasses and couldn't take them off. A veil of aerosol wrapped around the entire globe. It hung so high that rain couldn't wash it away. It acted like a massive mirror suspended in the sky, bouncing the sun's rays meant to warm the land and oceans straight back into space. The planet began to cool, slowly but inevitably. The energy balance that had sustained life on Earth for millions of years broke down. The average temperature in the northern hemisphere dropped by just 0.7 of a degree Celsius. It sounds insignificant, but on a planetary scale, it's like shifting the Earth's axis by a millimeter, and that was enough to break the entire climate system. The usual flow of air masses got thrown off. Warm, moisture-carrying winds weakened or shifted course. Cold Arctic blasts gained the freedom to push far south. This unleashed the extreme events that brought the world to its knees. Snow in June. Drought in India. 130 days of rain in Switzerland. All of it traced back to a single mountain brushing the sky. The planet was cooling. Millions faced hunger. But for a handful of English aristocrats trapped by rain in a Swiss villa, the real storm was just beginning. The catastrophe brought more than just hunger. It gave birth to monsters. One was made of wood and iron, the other of flesh, nightmares, and loneliness. In 1816, the oat harvest, the main fuel for horses, failed. Prices shot up sevenfold. The transportation system of an entire continent, powered by living muscle, ground to a halt. Cities faced the threat of starvation. Then, German Baron Karl von Drais, watching starving horses, invented a mechanical alternative. His running machine, patented as the Lauf machine, was an awkward wooden ancestor of the modern bicycle. 2 wheels, a frame, and handlebars. No pedals. You pushed off the ground with your feet. A strange, ungainly contraption. But it answered the crisis, a practical monster born from desperation. While Germany gave birth to a monster of iron, another one stirred in Switzerland, trapped beneath endless rain. That same spring, Lord Byron arrived at Villa Diodati by Lake Geneva. He was the most scandalous rock star of his time, fleeing England to escape debts and broken hearts. Alongside him were friends, the rebellious poet Percy Bysshe Shelley and his young lover Mary Godwin. They had hoped for an idyllic summer filled with strolls across alpine meadows. Instead, they faced 130 days of leaden skies and relentless downpour. A volcanic winter locked them inside four walls. Day after day, gray lake waters and sheets of rain hammered the glass. The air inside grew damp, heavy, suffocating. Boredom had turned into torture. They'd read every book, talked through every conversation. The tension was thick in the air. Then one stormy night, as thunder rumbled outside and shadows danced in the fireplace, Byron threw down a challenge just to break the monotony. Everyone had to write a ghost story. It was a contest to pass those endless, rain-soaked evenings. None of them knew that this dare, born from sheer boredom, would forever change global culture. That night marked the birth of a darkness that still lives with us today. Two of them took the challenge seriously. Byron's doctor, John Polidori, expanded on his patron's sketch and wrote the novella The Vampire. It was a breakthrough. For the first time, the vampire from folklore became an aristocrat, charming, deadly, and lurking in high society. This was the birth of an archetype that decades later would evolve into Dracula. But the true Titan was born amid struggle. 19-year-old Mary Godwin, before she was Shelley, the only woman among this circle of geniuses, struggled to find inspiration. Then a nightmare struck. A pale scientist looming over his terrible creation. A creature stitched together from dead body parts opens yellow, watery eyes. That night, Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus, came to life, and with it an entire genre of science fiction. Two immortal monsters. Two entirely new literary genres. All of it sprang directly from volcanic ash thrown across the globe. Cold, rain, and boredom became the richest fuel for imagination. Creative genius answered a global disaster by forging eternal myths. 7 out of 8. The volcanic activity scale shows no emotions. It simply measures the force capable of reshaping the world. 7 out of 8. That number feels abstract, weightless, until you translate it into something you can feel. In 1991, the Pinatubo volcano woke up in the Philippines. Many saw it on television. Its power rated 6 on the same scale, just 1 point less than Tambora. This younger brother released 3 times less sulfur into the stratosphere. But even that was enough to drop the global temperature by half a degree Celsius. Half a degree seems like nothing. Yet it triggered floods and droughts worldwide. 1 point difference isn't just a step up. It's a leap into a completely different league of destruction. Tambora was 10 times more powerful than Pinatubo. This scale forces us to rethink our place in the world. 7 points on the Tambora scale mark nearly the limit of what modern civilization has witnessed. But it's not the limit for the planet itself. There's one more level, 8 points. A mega volcanic eruption powerful enough to plunge Earth into a volcanic winter lasting decades, threatening humanity's very survival. That's the kind of event scientists fear could come from Yellowstone's caldera. Against this backdrop, the disaster of 1816 no longer feels like a distant ancient tragedy. It becomes a warning, a vivid demonstration of what a volcano can do, even when it's not firing at full strength. Here lies the greatest irony of this whole story. At the heart of destruction, a seed of renewal quietly took root. The volcanic ash that darkened the skies sparked famine and froze entire continents. Over time, turned into an incredibly powerful fertilizer. This gray blanket covering the land brimmed with nutrients. Phosphorus, potassium, iron. Everything plants need to thrive. The poison that wiped out one year's harvest became a life-giving elixir for all the ones that followed. Nature carried out its harshest, most effective soil recovery ever recorded. This isn't just an abstract idea. In 1980, Mount St. Helens erupted in the United States. It turned hundreds of square miles of thriving forest into a lifeless gray wasteland. It seemed like the land would never recover. But only a few years later, ash blended into the soil. And on these dead fields, they began to harvest unique, record-breaking crops. The region that survived this fiery hell transformed into one of America's main grain-producing centers. This completes the cycle. The Tambora eruption unleashed monsters of nightmare and steel, but it also fed future generations. The year without a summer wasn't the end of the world. It was just a harsh, unbearably long, and painful spring.